Alessia's life was simple and stressful. She worked late cleaning offices in Milan and saved every euro to take care of her grandmother and pay the bills. She didn't expect help from anyone, and she didn't look for love. She just wanted to finish her shifts and go home safely. Most people in the building didn't even notice her. But one night, she stepped into an elevator with Enzo Vieri, a powerful man everyone feared, and the elevator suddenly stopped. That was the night everything changed. Keep watching till the end to see what happens next. Subscribe to the channel and comment below. Where are you watching from? Alessia felt the floor jolt beneath her feet as the elevator came to a dead stop between floors. Her heart pounded in the sudden silence. In the dim glow of the emergency light, she realized she was trapped, alone, with the most dangerous man in Milan. Enzo Vieri, the rumored Mafia boss, stood just a step away. A muscle in his jaw ticked, and his eyes flashed with irritation as he stabbed the elevator button. Nothing happened. A low curse slipped from Enzo's lips in Italian, echoing in the confined space. Alessia's pulse spiked. This was not how her late shift was supposed to end. She had been cleaning the top-floor offices long after most employees had gone home. When she entered the elevator, the last thing she expected was for Enzo Vieri to slip in just before the doors closed. Now the lights flickered, and they were stuck between floors, isolated and suspended in a metal box. What if no one realized they were here? And what could happen in the dark with a man like him? She swallowed hard, but forced herself to stay calm. Panicking wouldn't solve anything. Alessia had dealt with worse situations in life. Maybe not life-threatening, but hardship had taught her composure. She reached over and firmly pressed the emergency call button. A crackle of static responded, but no reassuring voice, only silence. Enzo gave her a sharp look. "Don't bother," he growled, pulling out his phone. He held it up, but Alessia could see the no signal indicator before he cursed again. He slammed a fist against the side panel in frustration. The loud bang made her flinch, but she quickly steadied herself. "Let's not do that," she said quietly, her tone respectful but firm. The last thing they needed was for him to break something or scare her more. Would angering him make the situation far worse? His cold gray eyes snapped to her. He was a tall man, imposing in his tailored suit, with an aura of command that usually made people tremble. Alessia's knees did feel weak, but she refused to show it. She had grown used to cleaning around powerful men who never noticed her, but being stuck with one in a powerless situation was different. "No one tells me what to do," Enzo said, voice low and dangerous. He stepped closer, closing the remaining distance between them. Alessia's back almost touched the elevator wall now. She could smell his expensive cologne mixed with a hint of tension. Her pulse kicked up, but she met his gaze steadily. "I'm just trying to help," she replied, nodding toward the control panel. The emergency call had yielded nothing. She glanced up at the ceiling. Sometimes elevators had escape hatches, but it was too high and likely locked. "Someone will notice the elevator is stuck soon." Enzo's lips pressed into a thin line. He wasn't used to waiting or being at the mercy of something as mundane as a mechanical failure. His pride was clearly pricked by the inconvenience. Alessia could see he was the type who thrived on control, and right now, he had none. A tense silence stretched as the air in the elevator felt warmer by the second. Suddenly the lights flickered again, and the car jolted, dropping an inch. Alessia gasped and reflexively clutched the railing. Enzo shifted, bracing a hand on the wall to steady himself. The lights went out completely, plunging them into darkness for a heartbeat. Then the emergency lighting returned in a dim amber glow. In that brief chaos, Enzo hadn't moved back an inch. When her eyes adjusted, she found his face a mere few inches from hers. Her breath caught as her shoulders pressed back against the cool metal wall. "What are you doing?" she asked, trying to keep her voice level. The question hung in the stale air between them. Enzo's gaze flickered over her face. In the half-light, his features were all hard angles and shadow. "You seem awfully calm," he murmured, almost a taunt. "Most people would be terrified stuck in here with me." There was a dangerous edge beneath his silky tone, a dare in his eyes. Alessia's heart thudded against her ribs. Fear curled in her stomach, but she forced herself to focus. She cleared her throat gently. "Getting scared won't get us out of here," she replied. "We should save our energy and figure out a solution, signore." She added the honorific politely, hoping to keep things civil. A soft, humorless laugh escaped him. He was clearly not used to a calm, measured response, especially from a mere cleaning lady. "Signore," he repeated, voice dripping with irony, "you know who I am?" "I clean the offices here every night. I've seen you before," Alessia admitted. She had glimpsed him stepping out of luxury cars flanked by bodyguards, striding through the marble lobby like he owned the world. She had heard co-workers whisper his name in both fear and awe. Enzo Vieri, a man with a ruthless reputation. "Everyone knows who you are, then you understand why it might be dangerous to displease me." His hand came up, not quite touching her, but his fingers braced on the wall beside her shoulder. It was a subtle cage. He leaned in closer, testing her reaction, her. Alessia inhaled slowly, her nerves screaming at the proximity of him. In the tight space, his broad shoulders and the heat radiating from his body were impossible to ignore. Yet she lifted her chin. "I'm just doing my job," she said steadily. She gestured to the discarded cleaning caddy in the corner of the elevator where her supplies had spilled when the elevator jolted. "I didn't plan this, signore, and I want to get out just as much as you do." His eyes narrowed. "People usually want to get out of my presence for other reasons," he said, his voice a quiet menace. The threat in his tone was clear. He was used to people fearing him, running to accommodate him. Alessia understood the implication. He expected her to be trembling, to fawn or plead for mercy, perhaps. True, her pulse was racing and her palms damp, but a flicker of defiance lit inside her. She had done nothing wrong. She wouldn't grovel just because he was powerful. If he thought a few menacing words would send her cowering, he was in for a surprise. The elevator walls seemed to shrink around them. Enzo tilted his head, studying her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite piece together. "Why aren't you afraid?" he asked, a challenge woven into the curiosity of his words. Alessia's throat felt dry. She was afraid, on some level. She knew very well who he was. But something about his question, about this entire situation, sparked her stubbornness. Maybe it was the fact that he was looming over her, trying to assert dominance when they were both equally stuck and vulnerable in here. Or maybe she was just tired of arrogant men throwing their weight around. "I press the alarm. I try to call for help. That's all I can do," she replied quietly. "Unless you have any better ideas, signore?" The honorific came out almost as a gentle rebuke this time. Enzo's eyes flashed at her tone. He did not like being challenged, however mildly. "Careful," he warned. "I don't think you grasp the situation." He shifted even closer, and now there was barely an inch between his chest and hers. Alessia's shoulders tensed. She could feel the heat of him, the threat in his towering stance. A mix of adrenaline and anxiety surged through her, but she refused to shrink back. In the close quarters, Enzo lowered his head slightly, his face intimidatingly near to hers. "People in my city show respect," he said, each word deliberate. "They know their place. Perhaps you should too." It would be so easy to give in, to nod and apologize just to appease him until help arrived, but a part of Alessia recoiled at the idea of acting submissive and scared, even if inside her stomach was doing flips. Respect? He meant fear. He enjoyed that she wasn't falling apart, but now he sought to break that composure, to see her bend. She drew in a slow breath. Her heart hammered, but her mind was oddly clear. "I'm not trying to disrespect you," she said, her voice still calm though quietly firm. "But if you expect me to panic just because you're Enzo Vieri, I'm sorry to disappoint you." His eyes widened a fraction. Clearly no one had spoken to him like that in a long time, if ever. A tense beat passed. The elevator felt even smaller with each second. Alessia could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. Enzo's gaze hardened. "Disappoint me?" he echoed. "You should be worrying about what might happen if you make me angry." His hand that was braced on the wall moved, fingers brushing a strand of her dark hair that had come loose from her ponytail. He tucked it slowly behind her ear in a gesture that felt almost threateningly gentle. Alessia fought the urge to shrink away. She kept her chin up. "The situation is already bad enough," she said, refusing to break eye contact. "We're stuck in here, possibly for a while." "Making you angry won't change that, signore." "You're a bold one, aren't you?" he said softly. There was a dangerous silkiness to his tone now, as if her calm demeanor was provoking a different kind of interest in him. His fingers lingered at a lock of her hair, and then he trailed them along the side of her jaw, a touch that made her skin crawl despite its lightness. It wasn't quite a caress, it was a test, like a predator seeing how its prey would react. Alessia's breath hitched. Enough. Her instincts screamed that this dance of subtle intimidation needed to end now. She had to stand her ground clearly, or who knew how far he'd push. She raised her hand and firmly knocked his away from her face. At the same time, she slid sideways along the wall to put a little space between them, her fingers finding the emergency alarm button again. She pressed it decisively, and a shrill bell rang out, echoing in the shaft. The sound was loud in the enclosed space, a clear call for attention. Enzo recoiled slightly at the sudden noise, eyes narrowing. His pride had been challenged, and now even physically rebuffed. He opened his mouth as if to snarl something, but Alessia seized the moment, her voice ringing out over the fading echo of the alarm. "Back off!" she snapped, her voice ringing with authority she barely knew she had. "Power isn't permission." The words hung in the air between them, electrifying the cramped elevator. Alessia's chest heaved with the force of her racing heart, but her glare didn't waver. With one arm she braced against the wall, keeping her stance solid, and with the other, she still hovered near the alarm button, indicating she was not afraid to push it again, or do whatever was necessary. Enzo stared at her, stunned into silence. The shrill alarm faded into a distant ring above them, and for a long moment, the only sound was the labored breathing they both shared in the charged space. He looked as though he couldn't believe what had just happened, that she had pushed him away, that she had effectively told him no. No woman, no person, ever dared to refuse Enzo Vieri to his face. Yet here stood a simple cleaning lady, challenging him in a way that left him momentarily speechless. In that frozen moment, Alessia felt a tremble in her knees, the adrenaline aftermath hitting. But she locked her legs and kept her chin high, refusing to show any weakness now. Inside, she braced for his retaliation. Would he lash out, roar in anger? She had crossed a line. She knew it. So did he. What would a man like him do to someone who defied him? Seconds stretched. Then, unexpectedly, a slow smile curved Enzo's lips. It wasn't warm or kind. It was sharp and intrigued, like the grin of a wolf who'd found a new, interesting prey. Alessia couldn't tell if that was a good sign or very, very bad. Before either of them could break the taut silence, a metallic groan sounded above. The elevator jolted again, then resumed moving with a lurch. The overhead lights flickered fully back on, making both of them blink at the sudden brightness. They had power again. Alessia exhaled in cautious relief as the car ascended. They must have gotten the elevator running from the outside. She stepped away from Enzo, finally creating a respectable distance. Her fingers were trembling as she picked up her fallen supply caddy from the floor, trying to occupy herself and hide her shaking. Did it really start moving again, or was she imagining it? No. They were definitely moving, nearing the next floor by the feel of it. Almost out of this box, Enzo watched her silently. That unsettling half-smile still played on his lips, but his eyes were hooded now, guarded. Whatever he was thinking, he kept it tightly leashed behind a mask of cool composure that had snapped back into place. The elevator came to a smooth stop at the ground floor lobby with a soft chime, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. The doors slid open. Alessia squinted at the bright lobby lights flooding in. Two large men in dark suits stood right outside, tense and alert, Enzo's bodyguards. At the sight of their boss, alive and well, they rushed forward. One moved protectively close to Enzo, while the other blocked Alessia's exit with a beefy arm. "Boss, are you all right?" one guard asked, eyes sweeping over Enzo and then narrowing at Alessia. "I'm fine," Enzo replied, his voice cool and composed. He stepped out of the elevator with that same commanding presence as always, betraying none of the turmoil from moments before. Alessia hovered just inside the elevator, clutching her plastic caddy of cleaning supplies against her chest. Her heart hadn't slowed one bit. She was free of the elevator, but not yet free of him. The second guard, a stern man with a scar across his cheek, grabbed hold of Alessia's forearm firmly. She tensed. "We lost contact with the elevator, boss," he said gruffly. "Strange malfunction. This one here." He gave Alessia a small shake. "She give you any trouble? Want us to hold her? Could be no coincidence the lift jammed with a stranger inside." Alessia's pulse skyrocketed. They thought she had something to do with this. She winced at the guard's iron grip, her mind racing for how to protest. But ultimately, the decision wasn't hers. It was Enzo's. He turned slowly, his gaze flicking from the guard's hand on her to her face. Alessia's breath caught. In Enzo's eyes, now back to a flat, cool silver, she could see nothing of what he felt. Luca's question hung in the air like a sword over her neck. Alessia's fate teetered in the silence. Was she about to escape one nightmare only to fall straight into another? A tense beat passed. Then at last, Enzo spoke. "Let her go." His voice was quiet, but it brooked no argument. Immediately, the scar-faced guard released Alessia's arm and stepped back. Alessia exhaled shakily, relief flooding through her. She hadn't realized until that moment just how tight her chest had felt. Enzo's steely gaze flicked to the guard. "She's not to be harmed. Understood?" There was an icy undertone to his words. The guard, Luca, she recalled hearing the other man call him, gave a curt nod, though his jaw tightened. Alessia stood there uncertainly, rubbing her freed arm. Her heart was still hammering from the close call. Was that it? Was she actually free to go? Enzo turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It's late. Go home, Signorina," he said, as if dismissing a meeting. For a second, Alessia was too stunned to respond. After everything that happened, he was simply letting her walk away. She mustered a nod. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice respectful. It was all she could manage. Clutching her cleaning caddy, she hurried past the guards, careful not to brush against any of them. Enzo's presence seemed to follow her until she crossed the lobby. She could feel his eyes on her back, but she didn't dare look over her shoulder. She pushed out through the glass doors into the cool night. Outside, Alessia sucked in a lungful of fresh air. Her hands were trembling, but she forced herself to keep moving, one foot in front of the other, away from that building and the dangerous man inside it. Only when she rounded the corner did she pause under a street lamp to collect herself. Her mind was reeling. Had that really just happened? She'd stood up to Enzo Vieri, and he'd let her go unharmed. Alicia let out a shaky laugh of disbelief that turned into a sigh. Perhaps he wasn't as monstrous as rumors said. Or perhaps she had simply gotten very lucky. She knew one thing for certain. No one defied a man like him without consequences. Maybe not immediate, but eventually. Would he come after her later, once he had time to brood over her insolence? The thought made her stomach dip. What if she'd just made herself a target? No, don't spiral, she chided herself. If he wanted to hurt you, he could have done it already. He even told his goons not to touch you. That was true. Enzo could easily have ordered her dragged off for questioning, and she'd have vanished into some Mafia dungeon never to be seen again. Instead, he'd ordered them to let her be. Why? The question nagged at her with every step as she made her way to the bus stop. Men like him didn't just show mercy for no reason. Was it possible he'd actually respected her stand? Or was he simply unconcerned with a nobody like her? Alessia hugged her arms around herself against the midnight chill. She replayed those tense elevator moments in her mind, the way his eyes flared when she pressed that alarm and told him off. She couldn't believe she'd had the courage to do that. At the time, she'd acted on pure instinct and stubborn pride. Now, safe under the streetlights, her heart fluttered with a mix of triumph and lingering fear. What if he was offended and changed his mind later? Powerful men were capricious. She had to hope Enzo Vieri had bigger problems to deal with than a mouthy cleaning lady. The rattling night bus arrived, nearly empty at this hour. Alessia climbed on and collapsed into a seat by the window. As the bus pulled away, she cast one last glance back toward the office tower gleaming in the distance. There was no sign of Enzo or his men. Good. She needed to put this night behind her. Yet as the city lights blurred past, she found that the adrenaline in her veins hadn't fully ebbed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, startling her. Alessia jumped, then quickly fished it out, half expecting some unknown number, maybe even Enzo's people, contacting her. But it was just a text from her neighbor, Rosa, asking if she was all right. News of an ambulance near their building earlier had worried her. Alessia managed a small smile. Always the worrier, Rosa. She texted back a quick reassurance that she was fine and would be home soon. She didn't mention anything about the elevator or Enzo. How could she possibly explain that? By the time the bus dropped her at her stop in her quiet neighborhood, Alessia felt bone-tired. She trudged up the steps of the small apartment building where she lived with her grandmother. Inside, all was dark and silent. Her nonna must already be asleep. Carefully, Alessia crept into the modest two-room flat. Even in the dim glow of the hallway nightlight, she could see that Nonna had left a plate of dinner out on the table for her, covered with a cloth. The sight pricked Alessia's heart. Her grandmother's little gestures of care always did. She wrapped the plate and put it in the nearly empty fridge. They would share it tomorrow. Tonight, her appetite was gone. Quietly, so as not to wake the older woman, Alessia peeked into the bedroom. Nonna lay bundled in blankets, breathing in the heavy sleep of the elderly. Alessia felt a wave of relief. At least her grandmother was safe and oblivious to the danger Alessia had brushed against tonight. In her own tiny room, Alessia changed out of her uniform and sank onto her bed. Only then did she allow herself a moment to tremble. She pressed her face into her hands, trying to dispel the image that kept flashing behind her eyelids, Enzo's dark, intent eyes locking with hers as she stood up to him. "Get a grip," she whispered to herself. "It's over. It's done." But her racing thoughts didn't heed the command. Eventually, exhaustion pulled her under, but even in her dreams, she felt a tall shadow close behind her. A pair of gray eyes watching from the dark. Across the city, in a high-rise penthouse office, Enzo Vieri stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the glittering Milan skyline without really seeing it. His mind was still inside a stalled elevator, replaying the shock of being told no, of being challenged by someone so insignificant, and yet she hadn't seemed insignificant in that moment. He lifted a tumbler of whiskey to his lips, then realized it was still full. He hadn't taken a sip. With a soft grunt of annoyance at himself, Enzo set the glass down on his desk. What was wrong with him tonight? A routine drive to leave the office? A freak elevator mishap? It should have been nothing more than a minor inconvenience. Instead, he had nearly lost his temper, and worse, lost his composure in front of a stranger. Not just any stranger. That woman. Alessia, he said under his breath, testing the name he'd overheard when one of the guards had checked her work badge after she left. It felt foreign on his tongue, and yet he found himself liking the way it sounded. Enzo's reflection in the dark glass showed a man frowning in perplexity, a rare expression for him. He prided himself on control, predictability, power. Yet in that elevator he had felt none of those things. First, the malfunction had wrested control from him. Then, astonishingly, that slip of a cleaning lady had defied him in a way no one ever dared. A slow smile tugged at the corner of his mouth as he recalled the fiery look in her eyes. "Power isn't permission," she had said, bold as brass. The sheer audacity. Enzo chuckled, a low sound in the empty office. Instead of fury, he felt a curious spark of admiration. How easily she might have cowered, begged, tried to appease him, as countless others would have. But Alessia? No, she had stood her ground, even when any fool would know how dangerous that was. He wasn't sure if he was impressed or infuriated, perhaps both. He only knew he couldn't get her out of his head. Enzo moved to his desk and pressed a button on his phone. A moment later, a voice crackled from the speaker, his head of security. "Yes, boss? Do we know what caused that elevator to stop?" Enzo asked, drumming his fingers once on the mahogany desk. "We're looking into it, sir," came the reply. "The maintenance team said it was an electrical glitch, but they're double-checking. It's unusual. We've never had that elevator fail before. Unusual." Enzo's eyes narrowed. He didn't believe in coincidences. "And the backup systems failed too," he mused aloud, thinking. "That shouldn't happen. The building was state-of-the-art." "We'll have a full report by morning," the security chief assured him. "Good," Enzo said, "and run a background check on the cleaning staff working tonight. In particular," he paused, picturing Alessia's face, her dark eyes steady with resolve. "The girl who was in the elevator with me, Alessia." "Yes, boss. We'll gather everything." Enzo ended the call. He found he was grinding his teeth, a bad habit he hadn't indulged in since his early days clawing to the top. Was it the thought that someone might have orchestrated the elevator incident, the possibility of a traitor in his ranks, or a rival family making a move? That was reason enough to set him on edge. Yet he knew something else was needling him just as much. Enzo stepped around his desk to a sleek control panel on the wall. With a few taps, he brought up the building's security camera feeds. He navigated to the footage from earlier that night, the ground floor lobby camera. On the large monitor, grainy black and white footage played. He watched as the elevator doors opened, saw himself step out, then caught sight of Alessia standing there, clutching her cleaning caddy. The camera had no audio, but he saw the moment Luca grabbed her, and how she'd stood stiff and unyielding in his grip. He saw himself pause, then gesture. Luca let her go. Enzo leaned forward, elbows on the console, studying the image. Even on the poor-quality video, he could see the tension in her body, the way she held her head high despite being surrounded by armed men. She looked defiant and frightened. He wouldn't forget the fear he'd glimpsed in her eyes inside the elevator, no matter how bravely she'd tried to hide it. She had been terrified. He could sense it. Yet she hadn't let that fear control her. A rare quality. He smirked to himself. This Alessia was quite the actress, too, managing to appear calm even when her life was hanging by a thread. His smirk faded as he watched the screen. There he was, looking after her as she hurried out the lobby doors. He recalled that moment vividly, the strange impulse he'd had to follow her, to say, what? He wasn't even sure. Maybe to assure her she was safe now, or to warn her to keep quiet about what happened. But he'd done neither, simply letting her vanish into the night. Enzo hit a button to pause the video. The black and white figure of Alessia was frozen mid-step, her face turned half away. Enzo's eyes traced the outline of her profile on the screen. He needed to know more about this woman, not just because of the potential security issues, he told himself, but because she intrigued him. Because thinking of her made something twist pleasantly in his gut, a feeling entirely distinct from the rage and suspicion swirling around the elevator incident. "Boss?" a voice interrupted from the doorway. It was Marco, his consigliere, poking his head in. "It's nearly 2 a.m. You should get some rest. Early meeting with the contractors tomorrow." Enzo straightened and cleared his throat, irritated to have been caught in a rare moment of reverie. He clicked off the monitor. "I'm aware," he said curtly. "Go on ahead. I won't be long." Marco hesitated a fraction, eyes flicking to the now blank screen, but he knew better than to pry. "Of course, boss." He slipped away. Enzo ran a hand through his hair. Yes, he needed sleep, but he doubted he would find it easily tonight, not with his mind burning with questions. Who had tampered with the elevator? If it was a move against him, someone would pay in blood. And why, in the middle of that potential attack, had fate seen fit to stick a fearless, vexing cleaning woman by his side? He intended to find out both answers. As Enzo finally left his office in the dead of night and rode his private elevator, fully functional this time, down to the garage, he found himself anticipating that background report on Alessia more than he expected. He wanted to know what circumstances produced a woman like her, a woman who either had no idea how dangerous he was or simply didn't care. The next morning, Alessia rose feeling far from rested. The previous night felt unreal, but the ache in her body proved it had happened. She steeled herself to face the day as normally as possible. She had barely greeted her grandmother when the phone rang shrilly, cutting through the quiet apartment. Alessia snatched up the landline receiver from the table near the kitchen. "Hello? Alessia? It's Bruno from Milano Cleaners," a brusque male voice answered. Bruno was her shift supervisor at the cleaning agency. Odd for him to call her at home. Usually any schedule changes were texted out. A prickle of unease ran through her. "Hi, Bruno. Is something wrong?" she asked, turning slightly away so Nana wouldn't hear. There was a pause, then a sigh on the line. "Look, I got a call from the client this morning, the management at the Vieri Tower." Alessia's hand tightened on the phone. "Okay, they reported an incident last night. Some problem with Mr. Vieri stuck in an elevator. They specifically mentioned you were there." Bruno's tone was caught between curiosity and irritation. "What exactly happened, Alessia?" Her mouth went dry. Of course, the building management, likely pressured by Enzo's security or whoever, had said something. But what version did they even have? Surely they wouldn't say their Mafia boss nearly harassed a cleaner. More likely she was being framed as at fault somehow. She closed her eyes, summoning patience. "I was cleaning, and I happened to be in the elevator when it malfunctioned," she explained carefully. "Mr. Vieri was in there too. We were both stuck for a while until it was fixed." Bruno grunted. "Malfunctioned, huh? They think someone might have caused it. You know anything about that? Caused it?" "No," she said quickly, heat rising to her face. "I just pressed the emergency button and waited like anyone would. I had nothing to do with it breaking down." Her supervisor sighed again. "I'm inclined to believe you, but you know how this looks. The big boss himself got inconvenienced and his people are spooked. They're pointing fingers, and you're the unfamiliar element in the scenario." Unfamiliar element. That's one way to call a cleaning lady. Alessia felt a spark of anger, but she tamped it down. "So, what does that mean for me?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "I'm sorry, kid. They've requested you not return to the building until further notice, possibly ever." Bruno sounded genuinely regretful. "The client is important to us, you understand. They pay a lot for nightly cleaning. We can't afford to lose the contract." Alessia's stomach dropped. "So I'm fired." It wasn't even a question. There was a painful stretch of silence. "Let's call it suspension for now," Bruno offered half-heartedly. "I'll try to place you on a different shift, maybe at one of the other office sites, but this week there's nothing open. And frankly, if Mr. Vieri's people are suspicious of you, word might spread to other clients." He didn't finish the thought. He didn't need to. Alessia closed her eyes, a bitter feeling washing over her. It wasn't fair. She'd done nothing wrong. In fact, she might have prevented something terrible by standing up to Enzo. And yet, here she was, losing the job that kept her and her grandmother's bills paid. "I understand," she managed to say softly. Bruno cleared his throat. "For what it's worth, I'll give you a good reference. Maybe you can find something temporary. Check back with me next month. Maybe I can put you on daytime in another building after this cools down." Next month. That was a long time to go without income, but Alessia swallowed her pride and thanked him for letting her know. She hung up, feeling numb. "Figlia mia?" Her grandmother's gentle voice came from the living room. "Everything all right?" Alessia realized she had been standing there, silent, for a long moment. Blinking back the sting in her eyes, she turned and forced a smile. "Everything's fine, Nonna," she called out, trying to inject cheeriness into her tone. With a deep breath, she strode back to the living area. Nonna peered at her shrewdly. "You look pale. Who was on the phone?" "Work," Alessia said, busying herself by straightening a stack of newspapers. They're doing some maintenance on the building I clean, so I have a few days off." It wasn't exactly a lie. The elevator did need maintenance now, she bet. Her grandmother clucked her tongue. "If it's not one thing, it's another. Maybe a small rest is good for you, Kara. You work too hard." Alessia swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes, maybe it's for the best. She forced herself not to think about the lost income for this rest day. The truth was, she would have to scramble to find temporary cleaning jobs elsewhere, maybe private homes or restaurants, to make rent this month. As for the long term, who knew? If Enzo's people had blacklisted her, cleaning any corporate site in Milan might become impossible. Her pride whispered that she should be furious, and she was, deep down, furious that Enzo's world had reached out and upended her life in one stroke. But another part of her, a more honest part, admitted she was also afraid. If they suspected her, did that mean she was on some Mafia watch list now? Perhaps losing her job was the least of her worries. She pushed those thoughts aside and spent the morning helping Nonna around the apartment, trying to act like everything was normal. But normalcy was shattered before noon. It started with a series of strange phone calls. The phone rang more than once with no one on the other end, putting her on edge. Worse, she spotted a sleek black sedan idling near her street at odd times. It seemed to appear and disappear, as if watching her. And by late afternoon, Alessia's nerves were thrumming. It could have been paranoia. Maybe she was just jumping at shadows after last night, but she couldn't shake the feeling she was being watched. Toward evening, she decided a walk might clear her head. Nonna was napping, so Alessia scribbled a note and slipped out, figuring she'd stroll a few blocks, and maybe stop by a nearby church to light a candle. Something to calm her anxious heart. Dusk was falling as she walked the tree-lined streets of her neighborhood. The air was crisp. For a while she began to relax, listening to the ordinary sounds of children playing in an apartment courtyard, and a distant scooter engine whining, neighbors chatting on balconies. Perhaps she really was overthinking everything. But as she turned down a quieter side street, she heard it. The slow roll of a car creeping along behind her. Alessia's shoulders stiffened. She cast a quick glance over her shoulder and her pulse jumped. It was the same black sedan from before, crawling a dozen paces back. It could be anyone, she tried to reason. A neighbor getting lost, perhaps. But deep down she knew better. The car's presence was deliberate. Alessia's instincts screamed at her to move. She quickened her pace, heart thudding in her chest. The sedan sped up slightly in response. At the corner, Alessia abruptly crossed the street, not towards her home but in the other direction, toward a busier avenue. If whoever was in that car meant harm, she wanted witnesses around. The sedan's engine revved. Instead of turning onto the main road, it lurched forward and cut her off just as she stepped onto the curb. Alessia stumbled back, eyes wide. The passenger window of the car hummed as it slid down. Inside, the interior was dark, but she caught the outline of a figure in the back seat. Her blood ran cold. She knew that silhouette. Enzo Vieri's unmistakable profile emerged from the shadows, illuminated by the car's overhead light as he leaned forward. Those same storm-gray eyes she thought she'd never see again fixated on her. Alessia's breath hitched. She froze on the pavement, heart hammering in her throat. The Mafia boss gazed out at her from the open window, an inscrutable look on his face. Before she could even process what was happening, Enzo spoke, his voice cutting through the twilight air. "Get in the car, Alessia." Her world tilted. Enzo Vieri had come for her. Alessia's mind screamed at her to run, but her body refused to move. Enzo's command echoed in her ears. "Get in the car." The back door of the sedan was already open, held by one of his men who had stepped out. Every instinct told her stepping into that car was a terrible idea. Yet the alternative, Defying him here, in the street, with dusk closing in and his guarded car idling, felt equally dangerous. Her throat dry, Alessia edged forward. Where are you taking me?" she managed, her voice tight. Enzo's eyes didn't leave hers. "Somewhere safe," he said, as if it were obvious. His tone was surprisingly calm, almost gentle, yet it brooked no refusal. Behind that calm, she sensed a coiled impatience, as if he might simply toss her over his shoulder and put her in the car if she refused. He had said he wouldn't force her, but she didn't exactly feel like she had a choice. Heart pounding, Alessia slid into the back seat. Enzo sat back, making room as she gingerly took her place beside him on the leather upholstery. The door thumped shut, sealing her into the dim, luxurious interior. Immediately she became aware of Enzo's proximity. The car wasn't huge, and though he kept to his side, she could feel the latent energy radiating from him. In the front, the scar-faced Luca glanced at them via the rear-view mirror. He was riding shotgun. Another man, a driver, was behind the wheel. The locks clicked, and the sedan pulled smoothly away from the curb. Alessia's pulse fluttered wildly as she watched her neighborhood recede through the tinted window. She was in a car with the Mafia boss who only last night had terrified and fascinated her in equal measure. Now he claimed he wanted to keep her safe. Safe from what? From himself or someone else? She stole a glance at Enzo. His face was cast in shadows, the passing streetlights illuminating his sharp features in flashes. He was studying her in return, coolly, like he was assessing a problem. I'm not sure why you're doing this," she said quietly, breaking the heavy silence. Her fingers twisted together in her lap. "What do you want from me?" Enzo shifted slightly, angling toward her. "First, I need to know something." His voice was low, meant for her ears alone. "Did anyone approach you after last night? Has anyone contacted you? Asked you questions? Threatened you?" Alessia blinked, caught off guard. "Approach me? No, not really." She thought of the weird phone calls. But those had just been silence, and the black car which, as it turned out, had been him. "Unless you count your people watching me all day," she added, unable to keep a slight edge from her tone. A ghost of a smile tugged at Enzo's lips. "I had to be sure you were safe. My men can be overzealous. For that, I apologize." Her eyes widened at the unexpected apology. Enzo Vieri apologizing? It was subtle and wrapped in excuses, but it was there. "So those hang-up calls, the car outside my house, that was you checking on me?" He inclined his head. "Precautions. I wasn't certain if last night's elevator malfunction was truly an accident. If someone intended me harm, you could have been collateral damage, or a loose end." His gaze flickered, turning hard. "If that were the case, they might come after you." A chill ran down Alessia's spine. She hadn't even considered that. "You think someone tampered with the elevator on purpose? To target you?" "It's a possibility," Enzo said grimly. "My security is investigating. In the meantime, I'm not taking chances." He paused, eyes searching her face. "Which is why I wanted you somewhere I can keep an eye on you, and also why I need to ask. You're sure you weren't involved?" The question hung in the air, and Alessia felt a spike of anger beneath her fear. She turned to fully face him. "I had nothing to do with whatever happened to that elevator," she said, her voice firm. "You think I sabotaged it to, what, trap you and then stood up to you for fun? That's insane." Luca's shoulders visibly tensed at her blunt words, and he half-turned his head. "Watch your tone," he warned in a low growl. Enzo held up a hand, silencing Luca without even looking at him. His eyes stayed on Alessia. "Easy," he murmured to her, as if gentling a skittish animal. "I believe you. I had to ask. There are few coincidences in my world." Alessia pressed her lips together, swallowing back further protest. It stung that he even suspected her, but relief also flooded her that he seemed satisfied quickly. His expression, in the dimness, had softened a notch. "I'm just a cleaning lady," she said quietly. "No one special. Definitely not a threat to you." Enzo's jaw tightened a fraction. He leaned back, exhaling slowly. "Perhaps not," he conceded, "but you are involved now, whether you like it or not." She frowned at that. "Involved? In what?" "Last night suggests someone within my circle or a rival intended to harm me," he explained. "Until I know who, I have to consider anyone connected to the incident as potentially in danger, including you." He glanced out the window as the car turned onto a broader avenue, leaving her neighborhood behind. "Also, I needed to be sure you weren't working for anyone. A cop, a rival family. You get the idea." Alessia couldn't help a short, incredulous laugh. "Do I look like a criminal mastermind or undercover agent to you? I can barely pay my rent." Enzo's lips quirked at that. "Appearances can deceive." He studied her another moment, then added, "My men spoke to your supervisor this morning." Her stomach clenched. That must be why she lost her job. So you know they fired me. A muscle in his jaw ticked. It was a precaution on their part. Unnecessary, in my opinion. Unnecessary. Easy for him to say. She was the one out of work. Alessia bit back a retort. At least he didn't seem gloating about it. Once this is cleared up, I can make sure you get reinstated, Enzo offered calmly. If you want. She turned to him, surprised again. The offer was unexpected. Was he actually trying to help fix the mess? We'll see, she replied stiffly. The truth was, she wasn't even sure she wanted that job back anymore. Not with the shadow of him hanging over it. And taking favors from a mafia boss wasn't exactly appealing to her pride. Silence fell between them. The city streets blurred by outside. Alessia realized they were heading north, away from the city center. Traffic grew sparse. Where are we going? She asked, noticing they'd passed the last tram stop she recognized. To one of my properties, Enzo answered. Someplace secure. Her heart thumped. Secure. As in isolated? Secret? She didn't like the sound of that. How long do you intend to keep me secure? A hint of a smile touched his mouth at her careful phrasing. Hopefully not long, just until I'm sure the threat is handled. And if I say no? Alessia ventured. What if I choose not to be protected by you? Luca let out a disbelieving snort at the front, but Enzo remained focused on her. You can walk away at any time, he said evenly. I won't force you to stay where you don't want to, but if you walk out and something happens to you... He trailed off, eyes flashing with something like genuine concern. Let's just say I'd prefer not to see you hurt, Alessia. There it was again, that almost gentle note when he said her name. Alessia looked down at her hands, uncertain how to reply. His man was a bundle of contradictions. Menacing one moment, almost kind the next. The shift in his demeanor from last night to now was dizzying. Why did he care? Was it simply guilt or honor, making sure an innocent bystander wasn't harmed on his account? Or was it something more? Before she could puzzle it out, the driver took a sudden turn down a narrow, poorly lit road. The car's headlights cut through the gloom. Alessia glanced out at rows of shuttered warehouses and industrial buildings. They seemed to be in some kind of old dockland or factory district on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of area where no one would be around after dark. Her unease spiked. This was the perfect sort of place someone might come to get rid of a problem. She cast a sidelong look at Enzo, her imagination briefly betraying her. He wouldn't bring her out here to kill her, would he? After all his talk of protection. As if reading her thoughts, Enzo spoke. Don't worry, he said quietly. We're taking a shortcut. Alessia wasn't so sure, but before she could respond, the first gunshot rang out. Crack! The windshield fractured with a spiderweb of lines as a bullet struck it dead center. The driver cursed and instinctively ducked. Ambush! He shouted. Alessia's scream lodged in her throat. The car swerved violently. In the same instant, Enzo lunged across the back seat. He grabbed her shoulders and pushed her down onto the floor. Stay down, he snarled, an arm shielding her head. Tires squealed on pavement. Two dark SUVs had appeared seemingly out of nowhere. One cutting in front of them, the other roaring up behind. Pop, pop, pop. Muzzle flashes sparked in the dusk as more bullets peppered the armored sedan. The side windows spiderwebbed under the impacts, the glass miraculously holding bulletproof glass. Alessia realized in a daze. The car was built to withstand this, to a point. Luca had drawn a pistol and was firing back through a partially lowered window before their car's driver's side slammed into the SUV blocking the road. The jolt was tremendous. Alessia felt the impact rattle through her bones as she huddled in the footwell at Enzo's feet. Enzo's hand pressed her head down even further. She clutched his arm in terror as the screech of metal on metal filled her ears. The driver floored the accelerator with a shout of fury. The sedan's engine roared and the car lurched, scraping past the SUV blocking their way. For a heartbeat, Alessia thought they might break through, but then a hard slam from behind jerked them back. The second SUV had rammed them. Luca fired again, shattering the sedan's back windshield at the same time. A hail of bullets from the attackers pounded into their trunk. The driver cursed, wrestling the wheel. The sedan fishtailed, momentum spinning it out of the line of fire for a brief second. In that second, Enzo moved. Luca, here, he barked. He pressed something into Luca's free hand, a sleek black handgun from Enzo's own jacket. Two guns now, both thundering in response as Luca unloaded bullets toward the attackers. Alessia's heart was a wild drum in her ears. She could barely comprehend the chaos, the screech of tires, the thunder of gunfire. Enzo's body hunched over hers protectively as shards of broken glass rained around them. She bit back a whimper. Was this really happening? An impact slammed into the car's rear again, throwing them forward. The driver lost control. With a stomach-lurching swerve, the sedan spun and plowed into something with a heavy crunch. Alessia's shoulder smacked into the back of the front passenger seat painfully. "Boss, we're hit!" the driver shouted. The engine sputtered. Their car wasn't going anywhere now. Enzo's arm tightened around Alessia. He had braced himself over her, shielding her from the worst of the jolt, but she heard his sharp intake of breath as his body jolted against hers. Pain flashed across his face. The sedan's engine died, steam curling from under the crumpled hood. In the sudden silence, metal ticked in the eerie calm. Luca twisted around. Boss, he called urgently. "Are you all right?" Enzo tried to speak, but only a pained gasp came out. His arm slackened and he sagged back, revealing his other hand clamped to his side, blood streaming between his fingers. "Enzo?" Alessia's voice shook. He blinked slowly, his eyes unfocused. Her stomach plunged. He was bleeding badly. Before he could muster a response, Luca's head snapped up, looking past them out the shattered rear window. "They're coming!" he shouted, panic in his voice. Alessia tore her gaze from Enzo's ashen face to glance behind. Through the shattered glass, she saw several armed figures advancing. Terror seized her. Enzo went limp, collapsing onto her shoulder. Alessia was suddenly holding his full weight. A cold realization hit her like ice in her veins. Enzo was out cold, and armed killers were closing in. They were sitting ducks. Alessia's world narrowed to a single grim task: protect Enzo. As the armed attackers closed in, she braced herself over his unconscious form, her heart pounding out of her chest. Luca emptied his pistol in a wild spray, forcing the gunman to take cover for an instant. With trembling hands, Alessia snatched up Enzo's gun from where it had fallen on the floor. She had never handled such a weapon before, but she refused to let these men finish them off without a fight. Propping herself against the back seat, she aimed through the shattered window at the first figure who broke cover. Her fingers squeezed the trigger. The recoil nearly wrenched the gun from her grip, but a scream from outside told her she'd hit her mark. One attacker dropped, clutching his leg. Before she could even draw another breath, the wail of sirens tore through the night. Flashing blue lights bathed the alley as police vehicles screeched onto the far end of the street. 5-0, let's go! One of the remaining gunmen shouted. In a blink, the attackers scrambled into their SUV and peeled off into the darkness, dragging their wounded with them. Just like that, the shooting stopped. Alessia remained frozen, arms locked, the gun still poised in her hands. Her ears rang with silence. Luca was at her side in an instant. "Miss, drop it. It's over," he panted, gently prying Enzo's pistol from her hands. She hadn't even realized she was still aiming into empty air. It was over. A strangled sob of relief escaped her lips. Her gaze fell to Enzo, sprawled motionless across the back seat. He looked deathly pale. "Enzo," she whispered, shaking his shoulder. No response. Panic flared anew. Was he even breathing? "We need to move him now!" Luca barked. The first police car was stopping near the burning remains of one of the attackers' vehicles, officers starting to fan out. "Boss's people are 2 minutes out. We can't be here when the police swarm in." Alessia understood. The last thing Enzo would want was to be found at a crime scene, unconscious and vulnerable. Summoning strength she didn't know she had, she helped Luca haul Enzo's heavy frame out of the wrecked sedan. He groaned faintly as they draped his arms over their shoulders, with Luca supporting most of Enzo's weight and Alessia steadying him on the other side, and they staggered down a narrow side alley, away from the flashing lights. Behind them, voices shouted, the police discovering the carnage they'd left behind, but no one pursued the trio, disappearing into the shadows. By the time they reached a dark, quiet side street, 2 black cars were waiting. Enzo's reinforcements. Several of his men rushed forward, and Luca swiftly passed Enzo's limp form into their arms. "Get him to the safe house now," Luca ordered, "and get the doc ready." The men nodded, carefully easing Enzo into the back of one car. Alessia hovered, not sure where to go or what to do. Her entire body trembled as the adrenaline drained, leaving exhaustion and shock. Luca turned to her, his scarred face unreadable in the dim light. "You're coming with us, Signorina," he said firmly, but not unkindly. She nodded numbly. There was no time to question or protest. One of Enzo's men guided her into the second car. Within seconds, the convoy peeled out, melting into the night, just as the wail of sirens grew louder behind them. Alessia sat on a plush leather sofa, hands wrapped around a mug of hot tea she couldn't remember being given. Dawn's weak light filtered through the tall windows of the opulent living room she found herself in. It was silent here, a world away from the nightmare alley last night. They had brought Enzo to one of his estates, a sprawling villa on the outskirts of Milan, from what she gathered. A private doctor had whisked him upstairs on a stretcher, while guards fanned out around the property. No one had told her much. After a blur of hushed activity, one of Enzo's stern-faced lieutenants had gently directed her to wait in this room and left her alone, save for 2 armed sentries by the door. She supposed they were there as much to watch her as to protect her. She sipped the tea mechanically. It did little to calm her. In the quiet, her mind replayed the events over and over: the elevator, the shootout, Enzo bleeding in her arms. A violent shiver coursed through her. The double doors to the living room swung open. Luca, still smeared with dirt and smoke, strode in, followed by a middle-aged man with an air of authority. She recognized him. Marco, Enzo's consigliere, whom she'd seen in the lobby once or twice. Alessia set the mug down and stood on shaky legs. How is he? Enzo? She asked immediately, voice small. Marco's expression was cool, alive. The doctor removed a bullet from his side. He lost blood, but he'll pull through. A wave of profound relief buckled her knees. She gripped the back of the sofa to steady herself. Thank God, she breathed. Luca, however, didn't seem relieved. He was scowling. He'd have been safer if not for certain complications, he said sharply. Alessia blinked, unsure what he meant. Marco crossed his arms, eyeing her with a mix of suspicion and curiosity. Perhaps you can help us, Miss Alessia. Is it? We're trying to piece together how events unfolded last night. Alessia's fingers dug into the sofa. She felt suddenly like she was in an interrogation. I don't know, she stammered. Those men came out of nowhere. We just tried to survive. Indeed you did, Marco interrupted, his tone unreadable. According to Luca, you showed remarkable initiative, taking up a weapon to defend Enzo. Her cheeks warmed. I only did what anyone would have done in my place, she said quietly. Luca snorted. Hardly. Most would have cowered. You have guts, I'll give you that. Alessia glanced between the 2 men warily. Compliments were not what she'd expected. There was an undertone here she didn't like. Why are you telling me this? Marco inclined his head. We're grateful, of course. You likely saved Enzo's life with your actions. His eyes hardened an instant later. But the question remains, why were you there in the first place? Her stomach dropped. Because Enzo told me to get in the car, she replied, taken aback. He said I might be in danger. He wanted to keep me safe. Luca's lip curled. And wouldn't you know it, danger found us anyway. Almost like it was following you. Alessia stiffened. What exactly are you implying? Marco held up a hand toward Luca, silencing whatever accusation the scarred man was about to spit out. We retrieved the wreckage of the sedan, Marco said evenly. Our technicians have been over it. They found a small GPS transmitter stuck in the trunk lining. A transmitter? Alessia frowned in confusion. I don't know anything about that. No? Marco traded a glance with Luca. It's a basic device, readily available. One might use it to track a vehicle's location in real time. Realization dawned on her. The ambush. The attackers knew exactly where their car would be. Are you saying someone tracked us with that thing? It would seem so, Marco said. Luca's eyes bored into Alessia. The only ones who knew our route were in our circle. And you. His words landed like stones. Alessia's mouth fell open. You can't seriously think I had something to do with that tracker. How else do you explain it? Luca stepped closer, aggression rolling off him. You, a random cleaning lady, just happened to be in the elevator when it stalls. Then our boss decides to bring you along, a detour none of us expected. And suddenly we're hit from all sides. Sounds like a setup. Anger flared through her, cutting through the exhaustion. That's ridiculous. I nearly died in that attack same as you, she snapped. Luca sneered. Maybe getting shot at was worth it to earn Enzo's trust. Ina, maybe you played the damsel in distress to lower his guard. Even saved him at the end to really seal the act. Alessia was so furious she trembled. How could he twist her actions like this? That's insane. I had nothing to do with any of this. Why would I risk my life? Why would I... She broke off, realizing tears of outrage had gathered in her eyes. She roughly wiped them away. I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. Were you? Luca growled. Or were you exactly where you intended to be? Enough, Marco said quietly, but Alessia could sense he too was unconvinced of her innocence. Desperate, she looked between them. Please, check my phone, my life. I have no connection to anyone. I'm not working for anybody. Marco studied her keenly. If you are innocent, you have nothing to fear. But until Enzo wakes and we sort this out, you'll need to remain here under watch. Under watch. Alessia understood. They were detaining her like a suspect. Rage and disbelief warred within her. They truly thought she was some kind of traitor. 2 additional guards entered as Marco motioned to them. "Take Miss Alessia to one of the guest rooms," he ordered. "Make sure she's comfortable. No one is to speak with her until the boss gives word." The guards nodded and moved toward her. Alessia backed up, feeling cornered. "You're imprisoning me?" she accused. "A temporary precaution," Marco said in a tone almost apologetic. "If you are who you say you are, you will be fine. But understand, after what happened, we cannot be too careful." Alessia's heart hammered. She wanted to scream in frustration, but she bit it back. Pleading would only make her seem weak, or worse, guilty, and she had promised herself never to beg. Her spine stiffened. She lifted her chin, eyes burning. "I understand," she replied coolly. "But I'll tell you this. I'm not your enemy. And I won't be treated like one for long." Luca rolled his eyes, clearly unconvinced. The guards flanked her, one gesturing politely but firmly for her to follow. Head held high, Alessia walked out of the living room without another word. They led her through a maze of elegant hallways to an upstairs bedroom. It was larger than her entire apartment, with ornate furniture and a tall window overlooking the misty gardens. The door shut behind her, a lock clicking ominously. She heard one guard station himself outside. Alessia released a shaky breath. The morning sun was fully up now, casting slanted beams across the lavish guest room. It might as well have been a gilded cage. She pressed her palms to her forehead, trying to think. How could things have spiraled so horribly? One day ago she'd been scrubbing floors, and now she was... What? A suspected spy in the midst of a Mafia power struggle? She paced the length of the room, anger simmering under her skin. She had done nothing wrong. In fact, she had gone out of her way to save Enzo. And this was how they repaid her, locking her up and leveling wild accusations. Her eyes fell on the door. If it hadn't been locked, she might have marched right back to those men and given them a piece of her mind. Consequences be damned. Suddenly, a faint creak sounded from the other side of the door. Alessia froze. The guard outside? No, the sound was too soft, as if someone were trying to quietly turn the handle. Her pulse quickened. She backed away instinctively. The lock clicked. Was someone picking it? Yes. The door drifted open, just a few inches. Alessia's heart leapt into her throat as Luca's scarred face appeared in the gap. He slipped inside swiftly and shut the door behind him. The guard who had been posted must have been sent off or subdued. Either way, Luca was alone with her. And the look in his eyes made her blood run cold. "You," Alessia whispered, backing up further until her calves hit the foot of the grand bed. "What are you doing here?" Luca's lips curled into something that might have been a smile if it weren't so predatory. "Making sure loose ends are tied up," he said softly, drawing a silenced pistol from beneath his jacket. Alessia's stomach plummeted. Loose ends. She was the loose end. He leveled the gun at her chest. "You should have just begged for mercy when you had the chance," he said, almost bored. "Goodbye, Signorina." A strangled gasp tore from Alessia's throat as his finger tightened on the trigger. Bang! Smoke curled from the barrel of a gun that wasn't Luca's. For an endless moment, Alessia stood paralyzed, expecting to feel the impact of a bullet. But she felt nothing. And it was Luca who staggered forward, his eyes wide with shock. He hit the floor face down with a thud. A crimson hole gaped in the back of his suit jacket. Alessia's breath came rushing back in a single, ragged gasp. She lifted her eyes to the doorway. Enzo Vieri stood there, swaying slightly, one hand braced on the door frame. His other hand clutched a pistol, a thin wisp of smoke wafting from its muzzle. He was alive, awake, and he had just shot Luca from behind. Behind Enzo, 2 guards appeared, guns drawn, assessing the scene with alarm. "Boss, we heard," one began, but Enzo silenced him with a raised hand. Alessia could not take her eyes off Enzo. He was pale and drawn, dressed in a hastily thrown-on shirt open at the collar, bandages visible beneath. Despite the pain etched on his face, His arm was steady as he kept the gun trained on Luca's fallen form. Luca let out a wet groan, trying to push himself up. Enzo limped forward until he loomed over his traitorous bodyguard. "Don't move," he growled, voice cold as death. Luca coughed, blood spattering the floor. Somehow he managed a twisted smile. "Boss, this isn't what it looks," he gurgled. Enzo's jaw clenched. Without a word, he nudged Luca's dropped silence pistol away with his foot, then kicked the larger gun from Luca's reach as well. "I trusted you, Luca," he said quietly, a tremor of anger in his tone. "Enzo," Alessia whispered. Her legs nearly gave out as reaction set in. He spared her a quick sidelong glance, concern flaring in his eyes, before he refocused on Luca. Marco arrived then, breathless and wide-eyed, taking in the tableau. Alicia trembling by the bed, Luca bleeding on the carpet, Enzo armed and furious. The two guards hovered anxiously. "It was him," Enzo said, voice like steel. "He came to kill her." Luca let out a rasping chuckle that turned into a choke. "I did it for the family, Enzo," he gasped. "You were getting weak." Enzo's lip curled in disgust. "Weak? The only thing I was blind to was your betrayal." Enzo did not wait for an answer. He pressed the barrel of his gun to the back of Luca's head and pulled the trigger. The gunshot made Alessia flinch violently. Enzo had fired without hesitation, a final execution. Luca's body jolted once, then lay still, eyes staring sightlessly. The sharp smell of gunpowder wafted in the air. Enzo slowly stood, swaying as the adrenaline of confrontation ebbed. Marco nodded to the two guards, who moved swiftly to support their boss on either side. "Get him back to bed," the consigliere ordered, worry lacing his tone. "And clean this mess up before anyone else sees." The guards began guiding Enzo, but he resisted, shrugging off their hands. "Wait," he said hoarsely. He extended a trembling hand toward Alessia, who had sunk onto the edge of the mattress, still dazed. "Are you hurt?" Enzo asked, his gray eyes searching her for any sign of injury. Alessia let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. No, she managed. "Just shaken." Relief softened Enzo's features. His gun hand lowered at last. One of the guards gently took the weapon from his grasp. Marco laid a hand on Enzo's shoulder. "Enzo, please, let the doctor check you. Miss Alessia is safe now." Enzo's gaze remained on her. He nodded, reluctantly stepping back. "I'll see you shortly," he murmured. Two guards helped him back toward the door. Before exiting, Enzo turned once more. "Alessia," he said, voice soft yet firm. "Thank you for everything." Their eyes met. Alessia's heart gave a traitorous flutter at the warmth and respect she found in his expression. "Get some rest, Enzo," she whispered. He nodded, allowing his men to escort him out. The moment he was gone, the tension holding Alessia upright seemed to dissolve. She sank back onto the bed, covering her face with her hands. It was over, truly over this time. Her name cleared, the traitor dead, Enzo alive and safe. But Alessia's mind still raced with all that had happened. Marco himself remained behind a moment. He approached Alessia cautiously, his demeanor far warmer than earlier that morning. "Miss Alessia," he said, bowing his head, "I owe you an apology as well. We were gravely mistaken." Alessia lowered her hands. Her eyes burned with unshed tears of relief and exhaustion. "You were just protecting him," she replied wearily. Marco offered a faint smile. "Still, it seems we should have been protecting you too. I'm truly sorry for what you went through. Had Enzo not awakened when he did..." He trailed off, shaking his head. Alessia swallowed. She didn't want to think about how close it had been. "Is he really okay?" she asked instead. "He will be," Marco assured. "He's strong, stronger than any of us perhaps realized." The consigliere regarded her thoughtfully. "He cares about you, you know." Alessia's cheeks warmed. "He barely knows me," she murmured, unsure how else to respond. Marco's smile widened slightly, but he said nothing more to that. "If you need anything at all, please ask one of the staff. You are a guest here. A very honored one at that." A guest. Just a day ago she had been a suspect locked in a room. Now she was an honored guest. It was dizzying. Marco excused himself to oversee the last of the cleanup, leaving Alessia alone with her tumbling thoughts. The afternoon sun was high in the sky now. Beyond the window, the villa's grounds looked peaceful. Manicured hedges and swaying trees under a brilliant blue. Peaceful, yet she knew danger still lurked out there. Luca might be gone, but someone had orchestrated the elevator sabotage and ambush, likely Vitale, the rival Enzo's men suspected. The Vitale clan was still at large, and Enzo would surely retaliate. That world of violence would churn on, Alessia found herself longing suddenly for the quiet simplicity of her old life, mopping floors, caring for Nona, not worrying about bullets and traitors. This lavish estate was beautiful, but it wasn't home. And the man who lived here, her gaze drifted to the door through which Enzo had departed. She had so many conflicting feelings when it came to him. Gratitude, certainly. He had saved her life just now. Admiration, unwilling perhaps for his strength and presence. Anger, too, lingering from being suspected, though it wasn't truly directed at him, and a deeper, dangerous warmth whenever she recalled how he had looked at her, or the way he said her name. Alessia exhaled shakily. She needed to clear her head. Perhaps stepping outside for a moment would help. Slipping out through a side door, she wandered into the villa's peaceful gardens, hugging herself against the autumn chill. The late afternoon air was cool and smelled of cut grass. Alessia drew it into her lungs, hoping it would steady the turmoil inside her. What was she supposed to do now? Her job was gone, her normal life upended. Staying here in Enzo's gilded world, even as an honored guest, felt surreal. She paused under a pergola draped in autumn vines. Maybe she should thank Enzo properly, and then ask to be taken home. He had offered to reinstate her job. Maybe that could still happen, or maybe she'd find a new one entirely, and try to forget all this. Yes, returning to her life. That was the sensible path. This intense chapter of brushes with the Mafia elite would close, and she could go back to obscurity. Safe, ordinary obscurity. So why did that thought pinch her heart? Alessia closed her eyes. Because, whispered a traitorous part of her, nothing in her ordinary life had ever made her feel as alive as she'd felt in the past 24 hours beside Enzo Vieri. It wasn't the danger. It was him. A soft sound behind her made her turn. Footsteps on gravel. Enzo stood a few paces away, watching her. He wore a charcoal coat over his shoulders and leaned on a cane, likely the doctor's orders, but he was up and about. He had the air of someone who'd escaped his minders. "How did I know I'd find you out here?" he said gently, a wry smile on his lips. Alessia's heart gave a confusing little flip. "You should be resting," she admonished, though her voice came out softer than she intended. "I've rested enough." He limped closer. Sunlight through the pergola lattice cast dappled shadows across his face, accentuating the strong cut of his features and the warmth in his eyes as he looked at her. "I needed some fresh air, and to check on you." They stood facing one another beneath the trellis, leaves fluttering down around them. For a moment, neither spoke. Alessia searched for words and found none. The silence grew laden with things unspoken. Enzo cleared his throat. "Are you all right?" he asked. She hugged her arms, mustering a small smile. "I think so. It's been a lot to process." "I know." He ran a hand through his dark hair. His movements were slower than usual, but he seemed steady. "I owe you more thanks than I can express, and I owe you your freedom." Alessia tilted her head. "My freedom?" Enzo's expression turned earnest. "I don't want you to feel like a prisoner here. You're free to go anytime you wish. A car is on standby to take you wherever you want, or you can stay as long as you like. The choice is yours." "The choice is yours." Alessia should have felt relief, but instead her chest tightened. This was what she had told herself she wanted, the chance to walk away freely. So why did it feel like an unwanted door closing? She looked down, fiddling with a loose thread on her sleeve. "Thank you. I probably should go home. My grandmother is worried sick, I'm sure." Enzo nodded slowly. "Of course. Nonna, she must miss you." Alessia smiled faintly at his use of Nonna. "I'll call her on the way. Explain something like I had to work a double shift. No need to terrify the old woman with the truth." Enzo shifted, the cane sinking slightly into the grass. "I'll have Marco ensure your job is restored, and if you prefer a different placement, that can be arranged. You'll never have to worry about money again, Alessia." She tensed, meeting his gaze. "I didn't do any of this for money." "I know," he said quickly. "I'm not trying to insult you. I just owe you a debt." He struggled for words before huffing a soft breath. "I plan to make things right, Alessia. I owe you more than I can express." Her throat tightened. "You don't owe me anything. You saved me too. Let's call it even, remember?" He stepped closer, within arm's reach now. Alessia felt her pulse quicken. "If only it were so simple," he murmured. "I have a feeling I'll spend a long time trying to balance the scales with you." There was something different in his tone, something almost tender that made her heart ache. She forced a light laugh. "You do like being in control, don't you? Even about debts." A ghost of his old smirk appeared, Guilty. But I find this particular debt, I don't mind it remaining unpaid for a while. Alessia's breath hitched. The air between them suddenly crackled with an awareness that neither quite dared to name. She should say goodbye, step away, break this spell before it bound them both tighter. But she couldn't move. Enzo. What happens now? She asked softly, voicing the question hanging between them. His eyes searched hers. There was wariness there, and hope too. That depends, he said, equally quiet. Vitale will answer for his moves against me, but that's business I'll handle separately. As for you and me, he trailed off, as if uncertain how to continue. Alessia's heart slammed against her ribs. You and me. The way he said it, like it was something real to consider. I won't keep you here, he went on. It's safer for you away from my world, but... He hesitated, raw honesty bleeding into his expression. I find myself not wanting you to go. The gentle admission hung in the air. Alessia's heart soared and sank all at once. She felt the same pull, a deep current, drawing her toward this complicated, dangerous man. Yet how could she possibly be part of his life? A life steeped in blood and retribution. She looked away, tears pricking her eyes. Enzo, At that moment, one of the guards appeared at a respectful distance on the path. Boss, he called, we have an update. Vitale's men have retreated from our downtown territories for now. Your presence is requested in the war room. Enzo's jaw tightened. Duty beckoned. Even here. He gave a curt nod to the guard. I'll be there shortly. The guard withdrew. Enzo exhaled slowly, turning back to Alessia. Business and bloodshed encroaching already. You should go deal with that, she said, mustering a brave smile. I'll be all right. His eyes darkened. This can wait a few minutes. No, it really shouldn't, she insisted gently. Your family needs you. I'll be fine. Enzo reached out as if to touch her cheek, then stopped himself. Instead, he took her hand in his. His grip was warm and sure despite the bandages visible on his wrist. Alessia's breath caught. At least allow me to see you off, he said. She nodded, squeezing his hand once before pulling hers away, lest she never let go. Together, they walked slowly back toward the villa, an unspoken heaviness between them. At the grand front steps, a sleek car waited, engine idling, her chariot back to the ordinary world. Marco stood by the open passenger door, discreetly looking elsewhere to give them a semblance of privacy for goodbye. Alessia turned to Enzo. He looked like he wanted to say 1,000 things, but settled on, If you ever need anything at all, I'm a phone call away. She swallowed the lump in her throat and forced a light tone. I think I've had enough excitement for a lifetime, don't you? He didn't smile. Gently, he reached into his coat and brought out something. Her cell phone, cleaned and charged. Your phone. We retrieved it from your bag. She accepted it, noticing a new number already saved on the screen simply under the name Enzo. It made her heart twist. Thank you, she said. Enzo nodded. An awkward beat passed. Well? Alessia mustered a brave smile. Goodbye, Enzo. His eyes flickered with something like panic for a split second. He stepped forward, an impulse clearly driving him, and for a moment, she thought he might kiss her. Her heart slammed painfully, and she realized with both terror and thrill that she wanted him to, but he didn't. With obvious effort, Enzo restrained himself. Instead, he brought his hand up to her face slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His knuckles caressed her cheek, a whisper of contact that sent a cascade of warmth through her. Arrivederci, Alessia, he said softly. Not goodbye. Arrivederci. Until we meet again. She bit her trembling lip and turned before the tears gathering in her eyes could fall. With one last look at Enzo, committing the image of him standing there, strong and silent, to her memory, she ducked into the car. The door closed. As the car rolled away, Alessia kept her eyes on Enzo until the winding drive hid him from view, a hollow ache forming in her chest. Why did turning away from him feel so difficult? As the driver pulled away down the long drive, Alessia twisted in her seat to gaze back at Enzo through the rear window. He remained at the top of the steps, cane in hand, watching her depart until distance and sunlight swallowed him from view. Her chest ached with an inexplicable hollowness. She told herself she was simply coming down from an adrenaline high, that life would return to normal now. Yet as the villa's gates rolled shut behind her, Alessia couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be quite normal again. What would become of Enzo Vieri and the empire he commanded without fear? What would become of her, after glimpsing a world so far from her own? Those questions swirled in her mind, unanswered, as the car carried her away from danger, away from chaos, and away from the man who would not soon forget the cleaning lady who said no.